All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. I'm having another discussion. This one's going to be a little bit more foreign policy oriented. Having a discussion with Tibbs. He's a really interesting guy. I follow his Twitter a lot. He has a lot of interesting sort of discussions and stuff on like foreign policy and stuff like that. Do you want to like introduce yourself and talk a little bit about like what your main interests are and some of your political history?
Sure. So on Twitter, I go by the Progressive Warhawk. So basically, most of my stuff I like to focus on is Middle East politics and just foreign policy in general. Um, I I've had a huge transformation throughout the years of my views on politics. I grew up a traditionalist, conservative, Christian conservative. Went to college, became more libertarian, was into Ron Paul, and then for a while was an anarcho-capitalist. Then I transitioned more to progressivism, um, and then my views on foreign policy started to change due to the conflict in Syria. And most of the videos on my channel are do talk about the conflict in Syria from the Kurdish perspective.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's definitely something we could talk a little bit about. So I guess what originally made you interested in like becoming a Ron Paul supporter?
So when I was, what got me into Ron Paul was back when I was a traditionalist Christian conservative was I used to watch Glenn Beck a lot and all this, and I was involved with the Tea Party and stuff. So I started hearing things about this old guy named Ron Paul, and I started checking him out, and I was like, well, he's more consistent and ideologically pure than these other conservatives, and that's when I started discovering what libertarianism is, and that led me down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Also, I became more libertarian because when I went to college, it was my first time experiencing um, and meeting a gay person, and
Mm.
I at the time I didn't know he was gay, and I became friends with him. We were both fraternity brothers, and then I later found out he was gay, and I was like, well, what kind of human being would I be if I treated him any different just because of my religious views? And that's when I that all started me um, leaving the faith that I was in that
Mm.
experience.
Oh,
So,
yeah, interesting.
because right now I'm actually an anti-theist atheist.
Wow.
I'm just yeah I'm but my family doesn't know I'm in the closet.
You're closeted atheist.
I'm a closeted
Yeah,
atheist, but not online. Like I'm very open about that.
yeah. I can understand that. I'm sure like I'm an atheist, but my family is very secular. So there's no real conflict. There's no real pushback. They just
Mm.
don't, you know.
No, like I wouldn't be like any danger or anything, but like
Mhm.
um, it's mostly for my father's sake that I
Yeah.
don't come out. I don't want him because I know he would feel very disappointed and he would put most of the blame on himself. So I want to avoid all that.
Yeah, yeah. Just don't want to create undue conflict. Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally get that. So yeah, interesting. I was definitely into Ron Paul too, for a time. What kind of made you like less interested in like libertarianism and becoming more progressive?
So um, because like when I was looking into libertarianism and stuff, and I was reading different libertarians, I started reading stuff like Murray Rothbard, and that's when I started going down the rabbit hole of anarcho-capitalism. And I was even trying to start like libertarian groups on my campus.
Mm.
And I don't know, it got it got a little crazy. Eventually some of my close friends sent me down and they're like, hey man, like they started like challenging my views on stuff, and I was like, yeah, you're right, none of this makes sense. So I started moving more to the left. Um, and a lot of that had to do with economics, of course. Like, yeah, as an anarcho-capitalist, I viewed it all government regulations and taxation as
Yeah,
the biggest evil of the world.
yeah.
So once I broke that down, it was a lot easier to look at progressive policies when it comes to economics. And I was like, yeah, no, we should have a strong safety net for the more unfortunate, and we should fund education so people are not illiterate idiots. And yeah.
I kind of had a similar experience. I feel like I was still sort of libertarian-ish in college. Um, I got into a lot of and this is something that I've really experienced too. There's a lot of different types of libertarians, and a lot of them were what I would call like the Trump beta male libertarians. These are people who are waiting for an authoritarian like figure to on the right for them to follow. And it doesn't matter who that person is. It could be Trump, it could be like someone else, some other figure. Once that person comes, they drop the libertarianism. And like there would always be these people that I would argue with, and they would be like, oh yeah, well, I'm a libertarian, but I'm against people immigrating to this country.
Is this like the Stefan Molyneux type of crowd? The Lawrence Southerns?
Yeah, it is.
I actually met Stefan Molyneux once when I was a libertarian. I went to a event in Odessa, Texas when I was in college and met him and Adam Kokesh.
Oh wow.
It was very interesting. At the time, like I was totally into it, and I even got to talk to him a little, but now looking back on it, I was like, I actually met this guy.
Yeah, and the thing too, I really liked Stefan Molyneux. I would say he was the person that really got me into being a libertarian. But the guy is like he's a cult leader. Like he's a legitimate cult leader
For sure.
It's an internet cult, and there's just all these sketchy people, and they're all just sort of riding the wave. Like it just the number of people who, and even at the time, like originally, there were a lot of people that were like basically white nationalists, but they were calling themselves libertarian.
Right.
So for instance, like, what was the guy's name? Like the Alternative Hypothesis. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I've heard about him from like other YouTubers, but I've never like looked into him myself.
Yeah, it's like I wouldn't bother. Basically, he was a libertarian too at the very beginning, but he like immediately started with the race realist shit in like 2009. So like this dude is like dedicated his life to pushing race realism and other racial science and other bullshit like that. And like that was the conflict at the time. Like it was just a bunch of Ron Paul people, and we're all talking about stuff, and then like the race realism stuff pops up, and then it kind of created a divide. And like all the race realism people that I remember from the back then, basically all of them backed Trump, like immediately. So to me, like it's like that was definitely something that like kind of stuck for me. And it's just like, well, are these people really in it for liberty, or are they in it for power for themselves?
Or are they just following a trend? Like, do they actually believe all this stuff, or are they just following the trends that they see online to make money?
Yeah,
I think it's different for different people, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that was like a huge put off for me. And then I just kind of like, I feel like after college, I just kind of like, I tossed it aside and was like, I'm really like on the left. Like I can't, like this doesn't make sense. There are definitely some things that I take from it. I think that while their understanding of economics is not totally like true, it can show you some things that are pretty useful, I think, at least for me. Especially some economic arguments about things like free trade and other things like that, supply and demand, I guess. But yeah, otherwise a lot of it's just kind of BS, honestly.
Well, like my problem with the libertarians is they take everything to the extreme.
Yeah, they do.
Like I was watching a libertarian debate from 2016 for the presidential candidacy, and when you have Gary Johnson on there and he looks like the rational one, there's something wrong with your party.
Yeah, he's super rational. Like they had arguments about, should there be driver's licenses
in traffic lights?
Yeah, and he's like, well, yeah, there should be, and they're like, you're a fucking cuck,
You're a communist. You're
a fucking communist. It's
authoritarian.
Like, dude, no, come on, you can't actually believe that.
Yep.
Yeah, because they're crazy. Like a lot of it's just kind of craziness. That's not how a civilized society works.
Exactly.
That's just not how it works. So I think you were saying there was also some foreign policy things that kind of made you shift away.
Right. So like when I was in college, I was studying one of the classes I had was on Middle East politics, and when I was in that class, the Arab Spring was going on, and we were watching the protests in Egypt and all across the Middle East and parts of Asia, and it really got me excited about the possibility of there being, liberal democracies within the Middle East. Unfortunately, that hasn't really come to fruition yet. But at that time, I was starting to move more to the left. But even then, most of the people that were left that I was following online were very anti-interventionists. And this is when ISIS was starting to get really big, and we were starting to see the decapitations and everything online, all the horrors of their Islamic fascism. And this is when my views on foreign invention started changing. So
So did you feel like our intervention in like Libya was justified?
I think it was justified, and I think it saved a lot of people's lives. The problem was that we left. That's my conclusion. I think we should have stayed there a lot longer and nation build. We left the country in disarray, and then the theocrats started taking over and killing people. I mean, just left a huge power vacuum. If you're going to intervene in a country, it becomes your responsibility to rebuild that country. And that's a lot of criticism I have with Iraq as well.
I feel like, so just to stick with Libya, I think that there was a lot of excitement by different countries. I forget exactly who intervened, but I think it was like the United States, France, and maybe UK.
I believe those were the three main.
So they came in, they destroyed most of the army of Gaddafi, and then allowed the rebels to just take over. And then they just kind of were like, okay, we don't want to touch it anymore because it's a political thing that we don't want to deal with. We've had enough wars after Iraq. And like you said, I think that caused a lot of problems that allowed, some other bad actors to take over. And I think the other thing too, and this is, I think, one of the biggest issues in the whole Middle East, is that there's a bunch of more like imperialistic states with a lot of money, like Qatar, UAE, Saudi, Iran, and I forget, I saw it somewhere, but they poured in a bunch of weapons that went to a whole bunch of different people, and it caused a bunch of conflict. And if you have a state where there's a bunch of conflict, there's not going to be like peace. There's not going to be able to have a nation.
Right. Well, pretty much right now, Saudi Arabia and Iran are engaged within a Cold War, and that's being played out within Syria and Yemen at this time. So, I mean, I don't like Saudi Arabia or Iran, but we have better relations with Saudi Arabia, so it's very complicated.
Yeah, it's super complicated, and I feel like one of the problems is there's no purely good actors, and because of that, we're backing the least bad person who's also still bad.
Right.
And they're causing issues that are bad for stability, which is also bad for us, but we still have to have these alliances.
Right. Well, so I definitely think we should be backing the more liberal Muslims throughout the Middle East. I do think like the United States needs to take a more strong stance against Saudi Arabia and the war crimes that they're committing in Yemen. There's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, young kids starving in Yemen because of the what is it called?
The war?
Well, just because of the war, and then they're stopping goods from coming into the country.
Yeah, they're doing a blockade, you mean, right?
You're right, the blockade, exactly. So, like, we hear, like, I've mostly focused on Syria because that's just what has been my focus and what I've been interested in the most. But, like, there is a problem that a lot of people, including myself, haven't been speaking out against the war in Yemen. It's just, it's horrible what's going on. And I did see that the United States is sending a 3-star general to investigate this this bombing that happened with the school bus. And I'm hoping that there are severe consequences to the Saudi regime if they do not stop this kind of massacring of innocent
We'll sell them a
lives.
few less bombs and
Well, I mean,
drones.
like I said, it's really we're in a really shitty position because they're one of our partners within the Middle East. I wouldn't even call them an ally. The realists,
the reason I would say they basically are an ally, like other than Israel, like there's not many countries that are really like super friendly with us.
but I don't think they share the values and same interests.
No, they don't share the same values. They share some of the same interests, and probably more than most other countries.
Regarding Iran, yes.
yeah.
But yeah.
It's a problem. So to get back to the Libya thing, so you feel like let's say that you're the president, and so we do the intervention, Gaddafi gets killed, and then you talk to who was it, David Cameron and Sarkozy, and they're like, we're not going to do anything else. Sorry, we can't politically. Would you then like say, hey, I'm going to put troops on the ground at that point?
If the UN isn't going to do it, and Britain and France and our allies aren't going to help us with the responsibilities, then yes, I do think it falls upon us to fulfill that requirement. If our allies are not going to do their duty as well. So
okay.
yeah.
Okay. I kind of like. I think that it's a strong and I think good stance to have. My only problem is like, I feel like since the war in Iraq, things in the Middle East have just kind of spiraled, and we don't really have a way of preventing the spiraling. We can only it's like whack-a-mole. We can just whack another mole, but then at some point another one pops up.
Well, things, just to push back on that a little, like things have been pretty crazy in the Middle East. I mean, for a long time, but way before Iraq. It's just that it's come to our attention in the West far more since Iraq, since 9/11. It's before that, most people couldn't give a damn what was going on in the Middle East. Sure. It's just it's more in our mindset these days because of the war in Iraq, the war on terror, 9/11 and all that. But I mean, there's been massive problems in the Middle East for a long time before we ever got involved.
Yeah. I do feel though that a lot of the interventions that the West has done have caused issues, and
there's always consequences. There's always consequences. There's I would argue, there were consequences for us intervening in Iraq, and there were consequences for leaving Iraq, and then there's consequences for us not getting directly involved in Syria. I mean,
for sure. I agree with that.
And it's a lot easier to look back and criticize. I don't know. I'm not in those situation rooms. I don't know all the intel our president is getting, or that Bush or Obama were getting. So to me, it's harder to criticize the decision they make like that, whether or not to intervene. I do think it was a mistake for Obama not to intervene. I think it was a mistake for Congress not to give him the power to intervene, because a lot of people forget about that they denied his request to.
So you're talking about Syria, or are you talking about?
I'm talking about Syria and
so let's get to Syria in a second. I just want to sort of create a framework of I understand, because that's we're definitely going to go there.
Right.
And I think that we'll have some agreement. Sort of the basis I'm trying to build is these things happened, right? Things that are sort of out of our control, and this happens to a lot of presidents. Like, you're doing whatever, and then all of a sudden something happens in the world, and because the United States is the most powerful country, the way that the president responds is going to dictate a lot of how those events are going to be shaped, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So if we invade Iraq, and then we help the Libyans overthrow their government, and then have a force there in Libya, this is like a pretty widespread, you know, military conflict for us because, like let's say that then ISIS forms as it does.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're in Iraq and there's ISIS there. We're in Libya. There's ISIS there. How are we not going to, so like we're suddenly in large scale conflicts across, Africa and the Middle East. It just doesn't seem totally sustainable is the problem.
Well, I mean, there's let's see. So like I pretty much think that there's just always going to be conflict. I don't think there's ever going to be an end to conflict, especially regarding the Middle East until it's more democratized and liberalized.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you have Islamic fascists that control majority of the region, there's going to always be conflict and slaughters and mass human right abuses. Like so, like I'm not going to say like everything the United States has done in the Middle East was right or done correctly, but I do think that like the United States should be active in trying to form a better Middle East for the future. If that's not cheesy, but
yeah, I generally agree. I just think that I don't know, like
how do we get there?
Yeah, and what were your feelings on the Iraq War? Do you feel like that was like justified, or do you think that it was a huge problem?
I think the war in Iraq, the removal of Saddam was justified. I think it should have been done way sooner. Bush's father, Bush Sr., should have removed Saddam then and there, and we should have, tried to form a more stable Iraq back then.
Okay, that's interesting because, like, I definitely feel like I agree that Saddam is a horrible person that should be removed. The problem is us removing him created unintended consequences in a power vacuum that I think was worse off for what we would want. If you want stability in the Middle East, if you want there to be sort of governments that are have more Western values, I don't think that invading Iraq helps that.
Well, I don't think the stability argument, especially coming with like in response to Saddam, was like legitimate because Saddam wasn't a stable actor within the region. He definitely wasn't a liberal. I mean, he invaded Iran. He was committing atrocities, killing, the Shiites in the south and the Kurds in the north. The international community had every opportunity to stop these atrocities, but they just put sanctions on it, which hurt the Iraqi people more than it did Saddam. I mean, while the Iraqi people were starving, Saddam was still building palaces. So I think the argument should have been, instead of putting these sanctions on, the international community should have removed Saddam. Of course, that didn't happen, and the sanctions stayed in place for longer than they should have. The Iraqi people suffered under that. When we did finally remove Saddam, though, the problem was that we didn't stay, and that the leaders of Iraq encouraged the sectarianism between the Shia and Sunnis all over again. And without us in that area, the Iranians took advantage of that. I do believe that if the United States had stayed in the region, that the conflict could have been far less gruesome, and that the Iranians wouldn't have the foothold in Iraq that they do today.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what I would say is I wouldn't say that Saddam was like good.
No, I don't think most people would. So
yeah.
I'm not saying you're saying that.
Yeah. So it's just that when we removed him the way that we did, it caused unintended consequences, which created ISIS. It gave Iran more power. It hurt the Kurds some. There was it created like basically there was an ethnic conflict and an ethnic cleansing. These are all things that are bad consequences. And there could have just been a time, an alternate universe where during the Arab Spring he gets overthrown or something like that. So
one would hope, yeah.
Yeah, one would hope. But yeah, I just feel like the problem with Iraq is that Iraq was a country created just out of sort of thin air. Like,
well, yeah, most of the Middle East,
yeah, it shouldn't. And that's probably a part of the problem is like a lot of these countries, some dude just drew them on our map arbitrarily.
Right. I
and
mean,
they probably shouldn't exist the way they are,
I mean, it's the history of European colonialism still haunting us.
Yeah.
For sure.
Like, yeah. So probably the thing to do with Iraq is break Iraq up into like 3 countries or more and, let them try and share the oil wealth in some way. And our main ally would be the Kurdish country. Whatever the Kurdish country is, we should back them.
So you think like the Kurds should get their own country in northern, and then the Sunnis in the middle, and then the Shias to the south should all get their own individual countries. I mean,
something like it could be even more delineated. There could be other smaller countries within it, but something like that where the people. So give them more power so that there's less of this like internal conflict.
Well, like even if the United States hadn't intervened, that conflict is just much older.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
The Sunni Shia divide and non-Muslim divide goes far back. And I'm not saying you're saying that it's all U.S. or Europeans' fault.
Yeah, not all. We're like not making things better, but it's because we're intervening there more.
I just think
time period.
So. I honestly think things have to get far worse before they're going to get better.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think that it's like you said, it's a Cold War, and they're going to have to like fight each other, and then at some point in the future, they're going to run out of resources or something.
Well,
and then they're going to have to decide. We're going to see who's going to be the most powerful, just like what happened at the end of the Cold War.
So, like, part of it is like right now in Iran and Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of protests. There's a lot of younger people speaking out, a lot of liberal-minded Muslims and atheists that are starting to speak out against these governments. And I'm thinking within our lifetime, we will see either another Arab Persian type spring thing happen within the next 5 years for sure. I don't think these countries are stable. And Saudi Arabia, especially, when we start moving away from oil, the Saudi government is going to either collapse or going to severely change their economy.
Yeah, at some point, absolutely. When oil prices like go down a lot, or people just stop using oil.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
For sure, their country is going to be overthrown, and they know that. They know that, right? And they're probably planning for that in different ways. They're trying to make their economy more diverse. I saw this weird thing that they were thinking of like buying Tesla or making it private. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I have no idea.
Yeah. So yeah, they're definitely thinking about diversifying, but absolutely, like they are a resource-rich country, and once the resources run out, it's like that's what happened in Venezuela.
Oh, it runs out, or it's just worthless. Yeah,
one of the two, and then they're gonna have a lot of problems. But I think it was good that you brought up like I guess what was it called, the Green Revolution that happened in Iran around the time of the Arab Spring. Do you feel like we should have done more at that time, or do you think that our response was correct?
Iran's difficult. So all of it's difficult. Iran, I definitely think we should, and I think we have. I'm pretty sure we have been, in contact with the more moderate groups and moderate people within Iran that would like to see the regime removed. Yeah. I don't know if we need boots on the ground in Iran. I don't know if that would be helpful, or it it would hurt the revolution more. But I definitely think that the people of Iran are not going to stand by and continue this to allow this regime to have their Islamic fascism over them. I don't see that continuing very long.
Yeah, I think that they're probably the country that's moving the most democratically.
It could have helped. I think maybe the United States should have been more outspoken in their support towards these groups in Iran. But at the time, Obama was president, right?
Yes, he was. It was like 2009. So
was this around the time that we were trying to get the nuclear deal? I'm pretty sure.
I don't think so. I think that was his second term. So we were talking to them. But I think on the back end there was a time period where they were doing a clandestine, attempts to make nukes, and the United States and Israel were basically doing everything we could to sabotage it.
Right.
In which we succeeded many times. But they were in the clandestine make nukes on the down low part of their regime at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, we should have we could have been more supportive of that. For sure.
Yeah. I feel like he handled it appropriately. I feel like ironically a lot of people on the right were and ironically, this was, I think Glenn Beck was like, he was mad that we intervened in Libya, but unhappy that we didn't intervene in Iran, which didn't make sense to me because they both seemed like they're both equally as difficult to do. And well, actually, I would say intervening in Iran is even more difficult because that's a far more powerful country. And their ability to strike back would be a lot more. So if we did anything too, too aggressive, they were going to respond. But we were able to overthrow Gaddafi. If that was our goal was overthrow Gaddafi, we took him out.
Well, I think a lot of people on the right had a problem with Libya is because he didn't get congressional authority to do it. That's what I always heard.
Okay.
And then
I don't know if these things are totally true. I think, most people are just ideological, honestly.
Right. I mean, pretty yeah. Yes, I agree. But they're not very consistent. No, Glenn Beck. Plus, Glenn Beck's just a tool.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I think that mostly had to do with their critique was that Obama never got congressional authority to go into Libya and blah 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 blah, and then he tried to get congressional authority to go into Syria and they said no, and then now Obama is completely blamed for not going into Syria. But I am disappointed that Obama didn't continue to go on, but Congress definitely shares part of the responsibility for us not intervening more so.
Yeah. So let's talk about Syria then. Okay. So let's say that you're the president and you see the conflict unfurling. Would you have made the red line statement, or would you have just sort of? I mean, it's hard to say, in hindsight. But do you think that his mistake was making that statement about the red line, or not enforcing it? Which one do you think was the
not
problem?
Enforcing it? The use of chemical weapons should always generate a response from the international community.
Yes, it should. I agree.
And us not following up with that, I think, severely hurt the United States' credibility.
Okay, so you think that no matter what, when Assad used chemical weapons, we should have intervened immediately?
Immediately.
Mm-hmm. So again, this is kind of I totally get what you're saying, but I'm just thinking in my mind. So you're Obama, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here's how parts of your administration unfurl. You're elected president. You basically run against the war in Iraq because we were fighting the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Arab Spring. You invade you help them overthrow Gaddafi in Libya, and then you basically help rebuild that country. So that's basically like doing Iraq, right? And then there's it's justifiable. There's this issue in Syria, and then we intervene and we occupy them as well. So we're now occupying like 3 different countries in the Middle East.
Well, I'm not talking about occupied. I'm talking about a partnership.
Well,
I'm not talking about like we're going to go in there
in Syria.
Well, I mean, early on in the revolution, there were legitimate moderate people, and then they were all thrown in prison and killed, and then their bodies were burned. And the Assad regime has admitted that they killed at least 100,000 in prisons. So, I mean, there was a legitimate moderate response that we could have aided in the early days of the Syrian revolution, and we failed them. And since then, I mean, and then the jihadis and the Islamists became the main power against Assad. Yeah, it's pretty depressing.
Yeah, no, I definitely I definitely think that intervening, there's a very strong case, or at least doing something to topple the Assad regime just based on the war crimes that they did, And yeah, I don't buy into this the like, I guess you would call it the alt left, Assad truther people who are so insane about Western imperialism that they are apologists for like butchers like Assad.
Right.
I'm not into any of that. But I think that a case can be made that us intervening in Syria and like trying to build a country would be extremely difficult, difficult. And it was not just going to be some walk in the park. It's going to be like Iraq. You're going to get bogged down in a shithole.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, it's not going to be easy. I don't think anyone like claims that it would be easy to rebuild a fractured, destroyed country that's been under despotic rule since it's been created. I mean, Assad and his father were both evil butchers.
Yeah.
And I mean, it'll take a long time. See, like, the thing I'm not talking about, so like, to me, imperialism is when you go into a country, you overthrow their rulers, you install your own, and then you suck all the economic resources out of that country for your own. What I'm suggesting is we go in, we remove the despot, we work with the moderates within the region to build a liberal democratic republic with a strong constitution, make sure that all ethnic minorities are legitimately represented within that, protect against theocratic rule with the separation of church and state. You build up the economy by injecting money from your own economy into that economy. So it's the exact opposite of imperialism. You're not putting in your own dictator that'll allow you to rape their country of resources. What I'm suggesting is nation building. And yes, it's going to take decades to build up these nations, but I think that is something that the United States should be actively investing our time, our blood, and our treasure into for a stronger, more peaceful world for liberal democracies.
Yeah, I'm just imagining how. So the Iraq War cost us like $2 or $3 trillion.
Right.
And if we're thinking of the prospect of we're going to have, possibly the way that you see it, like a war in Iraq, a war, like we're going to try and nation build in Libya and in Syria, while at the same time our allies will be festering conflict there, like Saudi and UAE and Qatar, like all these countries have different
priorities.
They all have different priorities, and they all have different factions that they want to arm, and they want them to end up on top. And we're stuck in the middle of it, trying to find some good people to help. And like that sometimes can be really hard. It was hard in Libya. Like they had elections, but in the end, it didn't really generate a self-sustaining government. So, I just see it as like we're spending a lot of money and blood and and political power, political capital. And the question is, like, would we really actually be able to create countries that are stable? Are we going to be able to create like a Sweden or Norway in the Middle East?
Right. No, I understand that. Like, for sure. Like, I can understand where you're coming from. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from and the critiques of it. I don't think doing nothing is going to make the world safer or a better place. I mean, like I've said, it's going to have to get worse before it gets better. Despots aren't going to give up their power. The only way to get rid of them is to kill them, to get rid of them. They're not going to give up their power. They're not just going to step aside from their power. But I mean, all of this, the Middle East foreign policy, none of it, there are no easy answers. It's not like, we just go in there, kill Assad, and then everything's going to be peachy. Like, no, there are huge problems to the very fabric, the bone, the fabric of that country.
Yeah.
But I do think the United States, and not just the United States, that's where maybe me and like neoconservatives like differentiate, is like I want the international community to be involved within this process. Yeah. The problem is that they usually don't step up to the plate, and the United States is left alone. And another problem is that a lot of times the international community fails to step up to the plate. It's because China and Russia stop any action happening within the UN.
Yep, they do.
So I would like a multilateral response to these problems, but the UN has failed in doing so.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. There's a lot of internal politics at the UN that prevents any type of...
And then, like, regarding the amount of money it would take for this kind of revolution to occur across the Middle East, if and when you do bring about these new countries, that's more consumers for American products, so that generates more money, more wealth for American companies. I mean, the cycle would continue. That's more money coming out of taxation, things like that. Like, so I think, I mean, in the short term, it would be a huge undergoing. It would cost a ton of money, but in the long run, I think the world would be safer, and it would benefit the American economy as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of true. If we can have stable countries out there, for sure, it's beneficial for the United States.
I'd much rather be fighting the theocratic fascists over there than here. So there's that as well. So.
Although I don't really think that they're trying to like come here, like it's not really. I wouldn't really think that's.
I don't think like there's going to be a Islamic army that tries to invade the United States. But what I mean is, like, the more we kill over there of Islamic fascists, the less likely they're going to be able to do large-scale terrorist attacks here in the United States. Mostly they've been reduced to lone wolf-type operations, which are almost impossible to stop.
Yeah, I don't know if I really buy that. Like, if we're in Europe, like, sure. Like, Europe, that's kind of a problem where they're Muslim populations kind of get isolated and then get radicalized. Like the people in Belgium, they blew up a airport. I mean, these were people who were Belgian, and I think they had gone to Syria or something, or to fight, and then they came back.
Oh, okay,
yeah. They went to Syria, came back, and that didn't raise a red flag. But then they fucking blew up it was a real problem. I mean, that's the other problem too, is like a lot of these countries are like unaware of how to deal with some of these issues, like
sure
the UK and France. It's just been a fucking shithole. Yeah,
Europe's really failed with investing within their their military and their security and intelligence. They've mostly relied, in my opinion, they relied on the United States for these
Yeah.
two.
Yeah, they're getting the peace dividend that we thought we were going to get after the Cold War, you know? They're like, oh, well, we're not going to worry about interventions, and the United States just does everything for them. But yeah, I mean, one of the problems is now all of these problems are at the doorstep, and I think it's going to continue to happen going into the future. And yeah, it's going to be an issue for them to try and solve, but they haven't really been thinking about figuring it out.
Yeah, for sure. It's gonna have long-term consequences, and yeah, if they go if the right-wing extremists get their way, it's gonna cause even more problems. But same thing with the left, like these like open border people are insane. Like you have to have controlled immigration. So like,
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely like more for an open immigration. I don't think that. So, like, for instance, with the United States, I mean, I think that if you just let people, especially from like South America and Central America, like just come to work, it's not going to cause a problem for us.
right.
The thing about, and a lot of this has to do with geography, right? So, you know, we're the United States and Canada and, you know, the whole like Western hemisphere is like, it's pretty isolated. And if you think about it, most of the people are pretty similar. Like you speak like basically 3 different languages. Most of them are religiously pretty similar. You know, most people are Christian. Most people speak English, Spanish, or Portuguese. So that's not like very different. But if you think about like Europe and Asia and Africa, like it's not very hard for people from those places to kind of travel from one place to the other. I mean, at least there's routes to get there.
Right.
Unlike going. Yeah, it's not like people from the Middle East are just going to one day pick up their shit and move to America on a boat. You know, they can't do that.
Right. America is lucky within.
Yeah.
We have 2 giant oceans in between us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the world is shrinking due to globalization and the internet. And so,
but yeah, I think
those problems over there don't stay over there.
Yeah, sort of. I think the problem isn't like the immigration. The problem is the integration of the people. You know, I know some people who are like European. I know someone from Sweden, and you know, like she just says like the shit is super overblown about there being like no-go zones and shit like that. So I think there's a lot of propaganda by right-wingers to say that immigration is causing all this conflict, when I don't really think it's the immigrants. I think it's the reactions of people in the host countries, their reactions to immigration and the change that it brings.
I would argue it's partially both. I definitely think that there are extremists on the right that are blowing everything out of proportion. But there are problems of people not integrating and being secluded to their own communities, and that festering into extremism. So yeah, I think it's complicated.
Yeah, like most things, it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, everything's complicated. But like, yeah, that's why I'm like for controlled immigration. You know, strong background checks. A lot of problems though is like with people coming from the Middle East and Northern Africa is like you don't have the intelligence you need to know like who is this person. They don't have a lot of them don't have paperwork, like, and a lot of these people, they come from very patriarchal, conservative, very like super conservative societies. So there is a huge culture shock, but
yeah,
I mean, as long as people are willing to integrate into society, and I don't have a problem with immigration. Like, as long as they're coming here, working hard, and making a better life for them and their family, and yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I think the main thing is like, so if you just think about like what are the two sides of the equation for immigration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when immigrants come, especially from countries that are poor, they're probably going to have different. They're going to be different culturally, and there might be integration problems. But it's going to be really good for the economy because now you have all this labor that's going to come into your country, and that's going to create like demand for other products and things like that. So the way I see it is, it's good for the economy, but it's not always good for everyone, depending upon how the things are structured. Because if there's a lot of low skill people, that helps people that own capital, because then they're able to use their labor to like produce more products and stuff. And like if I think a lot of the problem comes with like people can see a lot of very, very dynamic, quick change in culture, and for them that's kind of jarring. And if they're not feeling the economic benefits of the immigration, then they're going to feel like alienated and unhappy.
Well, right, and with globalization and automation destroying a lot of jobs, mostly automation, but I mean that's kind of like how a lot of I guess the Midwest people feel here in the United States is like their jobs have all been either destroyed to globalization or automation, that they start seeing more and more of these foreigners invading the country, and they start blaming them. But that's why you need a strong social safety net, a strong welfare state, and like the idea that we're just going to retrain everyone to be programmers is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
I think what the United States should definitely move more towards is what's it called? Damn it, a basic income.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially so like every American, let's say every American gets like $1,000 a month type program. I think this would help alleviate some of that and plus it, because the major corporations are benefiting from the immigration, I think you should be allowed to tax them more. Therefore, you'll be able to afford these type of programs. And that way, people that are losing their job due to globalization and automation don't feel as what's the word? Isolated, and basically they have a stable income still. It's and they can look for other job training at that time. Well, and they're still getting this money to help them,
I agree. We need like some type of a safety net. I mean, really, it's just, to me, it's wealth redistribution,
right?
Because like that's the problem.
Which gets such a like dirty connotation to it, but it needs to happen. Like if the United States doesn't want to empower the extremists on the left and the right, we need to move to this type of model. Because if we don't, I mean, you're just gonna have more people moving to the extreme right, the extreme left, and that's just my view.
That's why it's happening. That's why you see more of the extremes becoming popular. It's right. Like people feel like they're not getting anything out of the system. The system's leaving them out to dry.
They're being left behind.
Yeah.
I think that's how a lot of Trump voters felt with in the Midwest with globalization and all that, is they're being left behind. They're the flyover states. No one gives a shit about them. And there's this guy that's saying, hey, all your problems, it's their fault. Elect me and I'll fix it. And that's the dangers of populism.
Yep. The everything's rigged, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I mean, it definitely connects with a lot of people, like what he's saying.
For sure.
For sure. Do you feel like were you like someone who felt like Bernie was too extreme?
No, I was a Bernie bro.
Okay.
At the time during 2016 election, I was way more so when I was in college, I was more focused on Middle East and foreign policy and stuff, and because I was taking classes on that. But I got out of college. It was 2016. The elections were going on, so I was way more focused on domestic policies. So I was a Bernie bro, Bernie or bust. Like
Mhm.
I ended up voting for Jill Stein, which is one of my biggest regrets in life. But yeah, I still like
Well,
Bernie.
you made the Russians very happy. So
Yeah, well, thankfully I live in New Mexico, so it still went blue. So if New Mexico went red, I would be a lot madder at myself.
yeah.
But I definitely regret not voting for Hillary. But
Mhm.
that's just my 2 cents. But
Yeah, yeah.
I like Bernie. My problem is I think it's stupid for him to call himself a democratic socialist because he's not a socialist. He's a social democrat.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not really impressed with this Ortiz lady or what's her name or
Just call her AOC. Alexandria Octavia Cortez.
Cortez. Yes, yeah. I'm not really impressed with her.
You don't like her foreign policy?
I haven't looked at her foreign policy, honestly. I just kind of avoided her. I'm just like, nah. But
Yeah.
a lot of times unfortunately, a lot of time progressives don't spend a whole lot of time talking about what their foreign policy is.
This is definitely something that a lot of people on the left have been talking about. Like, basically, there's no progressive, there's no left foreign policy. It doesn't exist.
It's all about domestic issues. Yeah.
Well, no, there is, but there's no clear way to articulate it, right? For at least for progressives, like I don't know if you would, and I think like for someone like yourself, like there'd be a lot of conflict with what a progressive would say. Like one of the things that AOC got into trouble for was she was sort of stating her opinion on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And,
right, yeah.
Yeah, and she kind of gave a answer that was mealy-mouthed, but also not really factually correct.
She wasn't prepared.
Yeah, she was exactly. She wasn't, and it's kind of the same with Bernie. Like Bernie doesn't really touch any of that,
Right.
because there's not a real like concrete idea set of policies and plans the same way there is about universal health care,
Right.
basic income, housing, all this other shit. Go ahead.
Well, like my problem with a lot of progressives is that they do tend to focus solely on Israel, and they never really talk about the atrocities that Hamas commit.
Sure, yeah.
Often, a lot of leftists, a lot of times it seems to be not just the Israeli government that they have a problem with. There is a faction of progressives and leftists in general that are anti-Semitic. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. But I don't see criticism of the Israeli state or Bibi as anti-Semitic. Definitely, I don't like Bibi's government. I think they're an extreme right-wing government. I don't support the settlements.
Yeah,
I think he's exacerbating the problem.
Yeah,
but
totally.
At the same time, I can say that and not be like, but I'm going to stand here with this Hamas guy and say Israel is the devil. I mean,
yeah.
Jeremy
Corbyn, right? Yeah. Look, so I almost feel like Jeremy Corbyn is he has like Trump level problems, but for the opposite reason.
Yes.
He always, because he's consistent. He's always going to align himself with like the social justice type person, no matter who they are, right?
Yeah.
Even if they're fucking terrorists, like he's like, well, look, they were fighting for their freedom, and I almost feel like it really is one of his strengths, because I've seen a bunch of like fascist like people, like very far right wing people, who are defending him on this anti-Semitism stuff, because they're
God.
Oh yeah, no, for real. Like I saw this one person I follow. She's like a Italian, like kind of fascist person, and she was like, no, Jeremy Corbyn's crazy because he's like a socialist and a communist, but no, he's not anti-Semitic because like he's right about these things. Yeah,
Oh my
So
god.
what's crazy is I think it can kind of push a lot of people towards him. I honestly think that can happen because a lot of people. So first off, like if people are legitimately anti-Semitic, they're gonna look at him and they're gonna say, "Well, wait, he's not anti-Semitic. Like, why are they attacking him?" And then that's gonna draw them towards him. And then there's just a lot of regular people who like his policies who are just gonna ignore it, right?
Well, there are a lot of people that do ignore it and just try to explain it away, which is
Yeah.
shameful.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not really well versed in all this stuff, but I don't really buy that he's like he's problematic. I wouldn't say he's anti-Semitic. Like the problem is he's always going to align himself with people and causes that are against sort of the Israeli sort of.
I see what you're saying. You don't think he actually hates Jews? He's just he's aligning himself with the perceived minority, the perceived oppressed.
Exactly. And that's the social justice thing, you know, is like you always are going to, it's about power. It's about aligning yourself with the person who doesn't have power and kind of looking the other way. This is the problem, right, with social justice. Is like sometimes you look the other way when the person out of power is also a bigot because your frame of mind is all about, well, you know, even if Hamas is sort of a terrorist organization, well, they're up against a far more powerful threat, which is the Israeli government. Therefore, I should back them anyway, right?
Right, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I get
it. And that's a problem too, because you know, if like he becomes prime minister and then they start like apologizing for horrible things that Hamas does, like those are still crimes that need to be like.
Well, yeah, he's constantly, you know, bitching at the United States and other Western, like it's like this masochist left that like just hates the West because like the West has done some horrible shit throughout the history. Like I'm not going to deny that. Like European imperialism was not a good thing, but like it's this masochist kind of like, oh yeah, we're so horrible, but these people over here, they're just victims and they just don't know any better, and it's their culture, and it's just
yeah, the cultural relativism kind of stuff.
Oh. Yeah. Makes me want to throw up. It's like it's so racist. So freaking racist.
It's really like I don't know. Whenever I see there's some people that I think are like there's very few people I feel like really get the Israeli-Palestinian conflict correct. They're either one side or the other. They're either like way too far to the left or they're way too far to the right.
I think Bernie was pretty fair about it. Like he believes in the two-state solution. He condemns Hamas but at the same time he's very critical of Bibi and his party. So I mean I think that's a legitimate progressive viewpoint.
Yeah, stance. Yep. Yeah, and it's just hard because I feel like most of the people in the public discourse on it, they're either like super pro-Israel and like in denial, and like if you ask them about settlements, they kind of hand wave or they say like Ben Shapiro had some insane quote about it. I forget what he said, but it was basically like, you know, oh yeah, he said Arabs like to bomb and
Israelis like to build, yes.
Yeah.
You can always count on Ben Shapiro for those hot takes.
It was like when he said at one point that he said rap is not music.
Oh.
Which is really funny to me because all he had to say was, I don't like rap music. Okay,
right. Okay, whatever.
That's fine. But like and this is a dude who is all about like being super logical and, you know, like all these arguments and shit.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
Yeah, like dude, I'm sorry, it's a fact. It is music, even if you don't like it. You know,
I just laugh at Ben Shapiro. Like I can't take him serious. I think it's all because he's so short. He has like this and complex, this Napoleon complex.
He's just a total fucking moron sometimes, and like. You know,
well, I kind of defended him though because I don't know if you saw, like on Twitter, I kind of defended him because they were, you know, that right-wing attack on the mosque in Canada.
Oh yeah. The guy, the attacker loved him.
Right. So he watched him and a bunch of other right-wing people and people that were way more extreme than Ben Shapiro. Because like Ben Shapiro, he's just like, a Jewish conservative. Like he's not super
Yeah,
extreme,
he's not extreme.
but
He's a gateway drug.
oh, okay, yeah. Like Ron Paul is a gateway drug to caps. Okay,
Yep.
but like
Yep.
so they were like trying to paint Shapiro as like responsible for this kid's actions and all this. I was like, come on, like seriously?
Yeah, no, he's not responsible. What I would say, it's kind of hard. So it's like Alex Jones, right? Is Alex Jones responsible for the people who harassed the Sandy Hook families? Probably not, but he perpetuated these insane conspiracy theories about the event that caused these people to believe these things. He was one of the major proponents. So the problem is that Ben Shapiro he makes a lot of like arguments that are sort of anti-Muslim, and so these people arm themselves with these arguments, and they then go to more extreme shit, and then they blow up a mosque or whatever, shoot up a mosque.
Like, if that's the thing, like that could be pointed at Sam Harris, that could be pointed at many ex-Muslims, like
yeah.
And we can't just like, oh, well, this guy criticized Islam, so yeah, you helped build this right-wing extremist that went and killed a bunch of Muslims. No, I mean, I don't think that's legit. Like,
yeah, I don't think it's legit to say that it is their fault that someone did what they did. I would not say that. I would say that they are. It's something to be self-reflective about. Like if you're someone who actually cares about critiquing Islam, and you see that some of the people who are listening to your critiques are coming out of it as anti-Muslim bigots, that's a problem because, like, do we want to have people who like hate Muslims, or do we want to have people who are critical of Islam? Like, those are two different things. And like the subtlety of that is something that gets lost on a lot of people, I think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know if you watched the Skeptic Jihadists, their podcast.
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay, it's so it's a bunch of ex-Muslims. Armin's one of them. I can't remember their other names. Damn it. But anyway, they're a bunch of they're ex-Muslims and they have a podcast. But they're always talking about how we're not. You hate the religion, not the person.
Yeah.
And one good thing that I've kind of heard in response to that though is Islam is just a bunch of ideas, or a bunch of really bad ideas, but it takes people to act upon those ideas. So that's kind of where I come into like I definitely think we should be critical of Islam. I don't think we should discriminate against Muslims at all. But
yeah.
like it's really complicated because people act upon these ideas within Islam. Like, it takes people to do these horrible things. If it was just like no one acts upon the teachings of Greek mythology or anything like that, like,
well, not anymore,
but it's just there's just these ideas out there. So like the hope is eventually it becomes like that. Like, these are just these ideas that are out there that no one really acts upon anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, as an anti-theist, that's the idea, but I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what. So the way I would put it is like I'm critical of all religions.
Okay.
Like, I'm not religious at all. So I mean, of course, I think that Islam is like insane, and the way that it manifests itself in the Middle East is like is horrific. Especially the fact that they're integrating religion with government. That's a total disaster.
Right.
Almost all the time. My problem with people like Sam Harris and, now sort of, I won't say that Majid Nawaz is totally doing that on Islam. I think he's doing that on other things. But just to stick with Sam Harris, he makes a lot of ahistorical claims about Islam and like other things. And I think that there's a lot of people who listen to him and they cannot create the connection of I'm against Islam, I'm not against Muslims.
Well, I think he did a pretty good summary of that. I mean, especially with his book with Majid, I mean, I think he's pretty clear that he anti-Islam, and he'll even say that like the Muslims that are not acting upon these horrible ideas, they're better human beings than their religion teaches them to be. Like, I don't think Sam's out there saying that, like, hey, we should all hate Muslims. I think there are a lot of people out there saying things very similar to that, but I wouldn't put Sam in that camp personally.
Yeah, I just find that I see a lot of people who are like super far right, anti-Muslim people, like not anti-Islam, but anti-Muslim people using a lot of his arguments.
Right. Well, so like that's what sucks is like these people attach themselves to you, and then
you're kind of stuck with them.
Well, like Sam constantly pisses them off. Like a lot of those people are like Trump supporters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's very anti-Trump. Like,
yeah, but I think that they just kind of shake it off by calling him a cuck, and then I'm kind of serious. Like, I remember there was one, like, basically a fascist, like, American person. She like lives in Seattle or something. She's like, oh, Seattle super cucked. When Sam said that white identity politics is like the worst of all identity politics, they all just shit on him. They all just like called him a cuck. So they're just like they're kind of just using him because they're like, well, see, he's making these arguments that are true, but he's a fucking cuck, and so because of that, you need to like kind of move on and come to us. I don't think it works all the time, but it's kind of he's still being used by them in a way that I think.
But anyone that criticizes Islam, these people attach themselves to you.
Yeah.
And well, not directly, but like online and stuff like that. And then they're like, hey, what about this? And then like it's more extreme, and they try to funnel people away from the more just criticism of Islam to the more anti-Muslim bigotry.
Yeah.
But like I'll stand by. I don't think Sam is an anti-Muslim bigot. I think he's just very.
I don't really either, but I think that he wades into a lot of topics without fully being able to. He just sort of inserts his bias in ways that he doesn't understand, and he has a very large platform, and he's kind of like, I think he's kind of bad at taking criticism, especially about his biases.
I think that's a fair criticism of Sam, is he's bad at taking criticism. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
But there's so many. The thing with Sam is like he's been dealing with people like Glenn Greenwald and all these other, I mean, that are just bad faith actors. So like, I think the problem with Sam is he has his walls up so much that like any criticism comes up as like an attack to him now.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Like race IQ kerfluffle was like, and you know, he's to me, he's just not even done with it. Like he's having on people who basically just confirm his bias. Like he had on some dude who's like an undergrad or something on his podcast.
I listened to that.
Like I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm sure that the guy is like he's not an idiot, but the reason why he's there is that he's confirming what Sam thinks right now about these issues.
Well, I mean, Sam has had people on that disagree with him, but like it's getting a lot harder to have people on that disagree with you, and then it just divulges into, well, you're just racist. Like Sam.
Well, I don't think like in the Ezra thing, I don't think he got called a racist. He was just like, it's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? You know? I mean, especially like he really sometimes sticks his foot in his mouth. Like he said, he called Charles Murray the most. What was it? I forget what he said, but he was like basically he said he was the most censored academic of his lifetime, or something like that. Something which is just absurd. Like it's just
with his book,
just like with the way that he addressed race and intelligence. Basically.
Right. Well,
which is absurd. It's totally absurd.
Honestly, I skipped that. I skipped that podcast. When it comes to race IQ and all that discussion, I don't I don't know enough genetics and biology to openly discuss those situations. Like,
I totally get it. It's toxic. It's totally toxic.
I think from what the little things I've heard Sam talk about, that's why he tries to choose his words very carefully. But I'll admit, like, sometimes he puts his foot in his mouth. I don't think Sam's a racist or anything like that.
I don't either. But that, to me, it's almost like worse when you're someone who is not like trying to actively do harm, but you keep wading into things without understanding. You're not understanding like what you're doing. Like, that's pretty bad. I don't know. I just think that he's not handling it well, and he's getting defensive on top of it.
I think some of that's true. I think he's very defensive. But yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss? we kind of been all over the place.
Yeah,
but it's cool. It's been a very fluid, organic conversation, and I've really enjoyed that. So
yeah. I don't know if there was anything else. So, well, I guess if you have any opinions on who do you think you'd want to see run against Trump in 2020, why don't we end on that?
I don't know, kind of hoping Joe Biden runs.
He will run. I almost think he's a sure to run.
I really like Joe Biden. We probably don't agree like completely on foreign policy, but I think he's a great Democrat.
Okay.
I think he's just a good, honorable man, and I would really like to see him in office.
Yeah, I think he's one of the odds-on favorites to win the nomination for sure.
I hope so. I hope Bernie doesn't run. Honestly,
you do. Okay.
So I voted for Bernie in 2016 or 15 or whatever when the primaries were going, but like I don't. For the sake of the country, I really don't want Bernie to run again.
Why do you think it's going to cause more division?
I think it's just going to be the Hillary-Bernie primary over again.
No, yeah.
And it was so bad. Like I was a Bernie bro at the time, so like everyone that was just like pro Hillary, I was just like, oh, they're just a Hillary bot, blah blah. Like it was bad. It was really bad. And and there's a lot of Hillary people that are just like, oh, it's just a bunch of angry white men that are voting for Bernie, and that that wasn't good either. There was a lot of bullshit on both sides. I think Hillary made a big mistake not incorporating Bernie more into her platform. I think that could have united the party after the primaries. But I'm hoping Bernie doesn't run and Biden runs and wins.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of people. I think you're going to see like Joe Biden, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker. I really think Bernie's going to run. That's just off the top of my head, the people I think are almost for sure going to run. So it's going to be a packed field.
Yeah, I think if it's a bunch of people, I don't think it'd be as bad if Bernie runs then. But if it's like just Bernie and Biden, then please don't run.
That would be. But I feel like that was the problem with 2016 was everyone got out of the way of Hillary, and it caused them to have a weak candidate win.
Martin O'Malley, Bernie, Hillary, and then one other guy in the first debate.
What's the first debater was like Lincoln Chafee and Jim, like the dude from Virginia, the Jim Webb.
Yeah, who's like super conservative. He's a Dixiecrat. Yeah, he's more like center right than center left, in my opinion. But he's a Democrat.
Yeah. Jim Webb is like, he's a real like kind of Dixiecrat, like super. He's always in one of the debates. He literally talked about how he killed someone in Vietnam. Like, not a joke.
That's crazy.
I swear he did. He talked about.
I don't remember that, but that's pretty intense.
Yeah, he was. Well, he made a reference. He was like, "Oh yeah, it was like I forget what it was, but basically he said, he was in a conflict with someone and he went back home and the other guy didn't.
Oh, wow,
So Jim Webb's a badass.
that's hilarious.
Uh,
And
yeah,
I guess the Republicans are not going to primary Trump.
I mean, the only person that I think, yeah,
if freaking what's his name?
Oh, Jimmy Carter.
Oh no, if John McCain wasn't so damn old, like
Yeah.
I would want him to run against.
The person who would do it would be Kasich.
Oh yeah, Kasich kind of looks like he's positioning himself.
I would love Kasich if he did it. I mean,
he's a lot more moderate. He's got that crazy, like, isn't he Mormon?
I don't know. He might be.
He's very religious. So there's a lot of social issues we're going to disagree on, but I respect him a lot more than a lot of other Republicans.
Yeah, for sure. I would like to see someone run against Trump just to like have someone hold him accountable on the right for what he's done.
For sure. Damn it! Why is McCain so old? McCain's probably my favorite Republican.
I don't know if he would do it though. I don't know if he wants to go through.
Well, he can't now. Like, he's just too old. He's not in good enough health. Like, he had that major surgery. There's no way.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean he's lucky to be alive.
Exactly.
Like the fact that he's even alive.
His biggest mistake was making Sarah Palin his vice president.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that he was. I actually think that helped him. I don't think he was going to win that election either way. Like, you're running. The problem was 2000. Okay.
I mean, it was Bush. The problem was Bush.
Yeah, the problem was Bush. The problem was that Bush, like Bush didn't fuck around, man. He really didn't. Or Karl Rove, whoever like came up with like the smear, because they smeared everyone they ran against, every single person.
Yeah.
They smeared McCain, they smeared John Kerry. I mean, it's unbelievable that a guy who never fought a war in his life beat all these people who actually served. But, that's kind of where we're at in politics.
Crazy times for sure. Wow.
Yeah. All right, cool. I think that should wrap it up. It's been a good discussion.
Yeah, very interesting. I've enjoyed, and I'm glad that everything remains civil. Like, we have our disagreements, and you kind of challenged me to make me think more about like how would we go about these kind of changes. I don't have all the answers. I'm just some out in New Mexico, this is one of my passions, and I've had a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. I definitely think that I feel like we agree on the way that we feel about Middle East, the conflicts, and what we would want to happen. I just feel kind of conflicted in using the force of the American state to fix them, because this doesn't seem like it's going to work long term. I mean, and what I'm just thinking in my head is like imagining if Barack Obama had like kept troops in Iraq, occupied Libya, intervened in Libya with troops, and intervened in Syria with troops like that. And that's what he was thinking about at the time, is like, I just can't do it, So.
Yeah, I guess just agree to disagree, I guess, for now. Until I can pull you over to the evil neocon side.
You're right, yeah. Maybe at some point.
Nah, just give me a hard time.
Yeah. No worries. All right, cool.
Yeah, definitely, if you want to read anything about neoconservative, I've only read a little bit so far, but I don't consider myself a neocon, but there are some of the things that they talk about that I agree with.
Yeah. Sure.
Douglas Murray's book on neoconservatism, Why We Need It's pretty interesting read so far.
All right, cool. Yeah.
Little plug for Douglas Murray. Oh my
God. Isn't he the IDW guy, or is it someone else?
I don't think so. Okay. I know he's a British guy that's pretty controversial.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool.
But yeah,
All right then. Good night, everyone.
Take care.
I think I'm gonna have a discussion with at least 3 people Thursday about if we should impeach Trump. That should be fun. So everyone, pay attention to that.
Yes, Robert Mueller needs to hurry up.
Yeah, you're right.
That's all I have to say on that.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care.